Joe. Joe.
Joe on Joe is the only podcast where Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello, and welcome back to the 5th episode of Joe on Joe Illustrated. This is the G.I. Joe podcast where we go through every single issue of G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero from Marvel Comics, one by one in sequential order, and we break it down like as if you're studying it for college. It's like a master's class in comic book dissertation. It's not a review show. It is a breakdown of all the wonderful things about every single issue of G.I. Joe. Now, if you're listening to this on the regular Joe on Joe feed, this is our Patron-exclusive podcast. You might be saying, well, I heard issue 1 a few weeks back, then why is this issue 5? You're not doing it in sequential order, but we are. Issues 2, 3, and 4, they're over on our Patreon page. If you go to patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod, you'll see how you can support the show. And for only $3 a month, you'll get access to every single episode of Joe on Joe Illustrated. Now, my plan is to do about every 5th episode live on the Joe on Joe feed, so you guys can kind of catch up and keep track of where we're at. But I hope that you'll go check it out. For only $1, you can become a grunt and help support the entire Joe on Joe franchise. And for only $3, you can be a Viper and get full access to the Joe on Joe Illustrated archives. And if we hit some tiers, then we will be doing some live action kind of oral theater stuff. You could see it all on the page. So please go to patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod and see what all the hubbub is about. So today we are looking at G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, issue number 5. This is a fun one. This is what I like to consider this sort of the start of the mythology. If you've been following along, you'll know that these issues have been kind of on and off with as far as establishing Cobra mythology and just having the Joes fight regular dudes. And this one really takes a strong foot towards establishing Cobra as an ongoing threat, an ongoing ideology, etc., and so on and so forth. So we always start every show of Joe on Illustrated with
You were saying,
where we take a close look at all the other comic books that were on the stands during the month that this issue came out. So G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, number 5 came out in November of 1982. So we're going to start with DC Comics because it's going to be a real short trip with DC. There is not very much worth talking about. As we said a little bit last episode, DC was in a bit of a slump time. They were in a little bit of a downturn. Some of their output at the time was Arak, Son of Thunder, which, yeah, sure, I have some copies of Arak, and it was a fine book, but it wasn't lighting anything on fire. They had Orion, Lord of Atlantis, issue number 1, though. Gotta say, Jan Duursma art on this book, it is overlooked. It is a really quality book. If you ever go to, I don't think they've really reprinted it in any kind of omnibus or anything, which is a shame. It is very much mired in the old DC continuity. But if you have a chance to get a complete collection of that, it's really quite an interesting and fun read. Most of it takes place like thousands of years before current DC continuity, and yet it ties into DC continuity as Orion was the progenitor of Atlantis. And they show the sinking of Atlantis over the course of the series and things like that. Spoiler alert. And it's a fun book. I really enjoyed it. I was able to put together my collection of Orion quite a few years ago, and I really like it. But having said that, it's not burning up the charts. Now, over in Batman, we got Batman 353. We've got a great Joker issue with the Joker on a Mount Rushmore style face, and he's going to blow Batman up strapped to dynamite. Like this is just a wonderful, wonderful iconic cover of stupidity. Like it's a crazy, stupid plan. Of course, it's the Joker's behind it. Batman's in peril. Like it's kind of got everything that you want out of a Batman cover. Other titles that were on sale that month, you had Black Hawk, again, not burning it up. You had the team-up books like Brave and the Bold and DC Comics Presents, World's Finest. The team-up books never really tore it up. Wonder Woman at the time, she wasn't really doing a ton of great stuff. Really she was needing the shot in the arm that George Perez would give her in about 3 years from now, right after Crisis. This is an exciting book. It is the daring New Adventures of Supergirl. And I'm glad I caught myself, because this is one of those books that is difficult to file if you're kind of an anal retentive comic book collector like I am. Technically, it is the Daring Adventures of Supergirl. Therefore, it should be filed under D for Daring. When you look it up in the price guide, it is under D for Daring. And then I think around issue 11 or something like that, they drop the Daring and it just becomes Supergirl all the way through. I want to say issue 19 is all off the top of my head, so forgive me if I'm off a little bit. And then in the comics, and then it picks up in the price guide under Supergirl. So the question is, do you file it under Supergirl? Do you file it under Daring Adventures of Supergirl? And if you're filing it under, let's say you have a Supergirl section, does it go chronologically, or does D go before any other Supergirl title? Because technically it's a Supergirl book, but D does come before S. Does it go behind Adventure Comics, etc., so on and so forth? These are the things you must ask yourself when you are a comic book collector, everyone. Superboy has a really sweet, looks like a Gil Kane cover. I love Gil Kane. I don't think we ever get any Gil Kane on G.I. Joe, but he was a master. He also did the cover for Superman that month, featuring the lackluster Terra Men. If you know who the Terra Man is, he was a singular dude, and he was interested in saving the Earth, and he dressed like a cowboy. That's all I'm going to say, ladies and gentlemen. So Sergeant Rock, of course, Legion of Superheroes 293. We continue the Great Darkness Saga. That's amazing. That's fantastic. Justice League continues the crossover they started last issue. Then you got things like, House of Mystery, presenting I, Vampire, things like that. Jonah Hex continues GI Combat. It's not a flashy month for DC. So now we're going to go say, hey, Marvel Comics.
You were saying?
Marvel continues to be on their streak during this period of time. We've got another Daredevil by Frank Miller. Remember last month he had 3 Frank Miller comics on the stands. This month it's that wonderful cover with Black Widow kind of cradling Daredevil in the spider's web on the cover. It's wonderful. Huge book this month. The Marvel graphic novel, they were numbering them at the time. So it's so funny when you look at the history of kind of just publishing and like back in the day, they never restarted numbers. They would just pick up series with numbers like Captain America 101 came off of, Tales of Suspense 100, like instead of just doing Captain America #1. And they were starting a graphic novel line, which is, to be very clear, graphic novels are not collected editions of comic books. So when people come into a comic shop and say, I want to read a good graphic novel, you better point them to an actual long feature, like long read, 100-page or so comic book that was designed to be read as 100 pages, not a collection of single issues wrapped up in a trade paperback. However, Marvel had just gotten into the graphic novel game. The very first one they did was The Death of Captain Marvel by Jim Starlin. So this is technically listed as Marvel Graphic Novel Volume 1, number 4. But we all know what it is. It's the New Mutants, the very first appearance of the New Mutants. Cannonball, Sunspot, Wolfsbane, Karma is who I'm thinking of, and Danny Moonstar. They first joined the X-World in this issue. So it's not first appearance of the New Mutants. It's not New Mutants number 1. It's technically Marvel Graphic Novel number 4. So that hit the stands this month. X-Men Annual 2 is a cool issue. It was overlooked for years, like years and years and years and years and years and years and years. It's got a beautiful Bill Sienkiewicz cover, and it's a crazy crossover when you think about it. It's the X-Men fight Dracula, and at the time Dracula was a real character in the Marvel Universe, and he's come and gone over the years, and Storm got bit and turned into his thrall. It's a story that would kind of go ignored over like decades because it's vampires, and Dracula and stuff. But a few years ago, when vampires started heating up again, probably due to Twilight and all that, they finally started readdressing the Storm story. Bloodstorm is one of the biggest examples of it. I want to say that she first appeared in the Mutant X books from the late 90s, early 2000s, and that's kind of the first time they touched on it. So what would that be like? What is that, like 16, 18 years or something like that no one mentioned that, Storm was a bitten by a vampire and a thrall of Dracula. Of course, Frank Miller's Wolverine number 3. The X-Men continue to fight the Brood over in X-Men 163. If you took my suggestion last month and tracked down issues 1 of Annie, Blade Runner, and Conan the Barbarian, this month you would get issue 2 in the completed chapters of those Marvel movie adaptations. This is an exciting one. You have Raiders of the Lost Ark, and again, technically it's Marvel Movie Spotlight, just like the graphic novel was Marvel Graphic Novel number 4. This is Marvel Movie Spotlight featuring Raiders of the Lost Ark. This was the Indiana Jones movie, translated into a Marvel comic, art by Walter Simonson. And it is gorgeous. It is an awesome book. And with this one, there's another filing issue like we had over with Daring Adventures of Supergirl. Do you file this under Marvel Movie Spotlight, which is technically what it's called, and how it shows up in the price guide? Do you file it under Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is also technically what it's called? Or do you file it under Indiana Jones in your collection? I don't have a good answer for that, everyone. I believe I keep it under Raiders. Funnily enough, Marvel did a Indiana Jones series, a regular ongoing series that John Byrne launched it, and it was called The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones. So now does it go under Further? Or does it go under Indiana Jones? Or does it go under Raiders? Because you've already established that the movie's called Raiders of the Lost Ark. These are the things that keep me up at night, ladies and gentlemen. And these are the reasons you're glad that you're not married to me. And the final book of note that I want to talk about this month is Vision and the Scarlet Witch, Volume 1, Number 1. This is, everyone knows that in the Avengers, they paired off these two, the Synthezoid and the mutant Hex Witch, and this was their stab at giving them a solo series. This, of course, was a 4-issue, and it led to a 12-issue about a year or so later. These are the miniseries that they said that Magneto was her father. They had him living in the suburbs. Like, it set up a lot of stuff that actually, if you've read the Vision series from last year by the amazing Tom King over at Marvel, you would see a lot of similarities. They picked up on a lot of this, of Vision's desire to lead a normal life in the suburbs and things like that. So that is,
you were saying,
for November of 1982 over at the Movieplex. Movieplex? Is they still call it the Movieplex? Over in the theaters. So apparently in November of 82, they released a ton of horror stuff. This is hot off last month. We had Halloween Season of the Witch, of course. And this month, we have Piranha 2, The Spawning, which is important in the history of cinema because that was directed by James Cameron. We also have an amazing movie called Creepshow that opened this month. That's the anthology movie from George Romero. The screenplay was by Stephen King. Wonderful, really awesome segments. Everyone remembers Stephen King played the guy the Moss Man who found the meteorite. There was a lot to like in Creepshow. So I hope you've checked that out over the years. We also had Slumber Party Massacre release that month. That's just like crazy horror movie releases. And again, this was a time when big picture releases were kind of a thing. Now you get a lot of horror movies released on demand immediately. Back then I guess they had B movies. I feel like they definitely weren't being released at the rapid pace that they are today. The other important movie that came out this month, June of 1982, is a movie that gave a lot of kids nightmares, strangely enough, from Rankin and Bass, The Last Unicorn. Wonderful, beautifully animated film and just a soul-crushing story for children. True story. I showed this I gave this to my niece, and I think she was a little young for it. I forget exactly how many years old she was. She cried. I was like, oh, but The Last Unicorn's a classic. Oh, no. It was frightening to her. So, yeah. So that is it for what was at the theaters.
you were saying,
All right. So with all that out of the way, finally,
now, mass is ready.
let's dig into G.I. Joe issue number 5. Cover by Don Perlin. We've covered Don in previous episodes. We've also got it inked by a gentleman by the name of Mike Esposito. Now, Mike Esposito is a Will Eisner Comic Book Hall of Fame creator. He worked on everything big. He was a longtime collaborator with Ross Andru, if you're familiar with his work. He worked on Spider-Man, just on Marvel Team Up with him. He worked on Amazing Spider-Man. They worked on The Flash together. And, he inked with Kurt Swan on Superman. Mike Esposito was all over the place and for both companies. So what that tells you is he's solid, he's reliable, he's quality, and he knows how to really bring out a lot in your pencils. Like so many comic book creators, he was born in New York City, and probably a cool little footnote for him is a Ross Andru, Mike Esposito picture that they drew of Wonder Woman appeared on a 2006 postage stamp. He passed away in October of 2010 at the age of 83. So Mike Esposito, we salute you. Cover is gorgeous. The cover is got a lot going on. Let's see here. So you've the initial image on it. You've got the Mobat coming out of a lake or a river of some type, and it's blasting away. There's a Cobra soldier wildly misfiring. Like that tank's right in front of him. I don't understand how you missed it, but there's a Cobra soldier shooting a bazooka wildly to the left of it. You've got Cobra soldiers fleeing in the bottom. And when you look on the top of the page, it actually gives you a sense of setting. So if you remove the top third, let's say you cover the top third of the image, this could be in any jungle. It could be in any kind of environment, like out in the wild. Like, okay, they're in the field, they're shooting. But when you peel back, and it's funny because it's obscured both by the logo and primarily by the trees. But if you just look at it's a small strip of the image, it tells you, oh, they're in the middle of a city. Now you don't, and technically it also says blazing combat in Central Park. Let's not overlook that. But text aside, it tells you a lot with just such a small piece of that image. It's really, really cool. Then the caption, which the caption would have come from editorial, by the way. Mike Esposito would not have put that on there. I do like that it says Central Park because then it sets it in New York. It's not just any random city. But honestly, I don't think you need that. I think it's just a great, great image. And it tells you everything you need to know that the Joes are fighting in the middle of an industrialized city. Like, that's not a great place to be. And looking at the Cobras on the bottom, you actually got, it's a great thing happening that is a tradition that harkens literally all the way back to Action Comics #1 of some of the goons or some of the not as important people in the image fleeing the main heroes and kind of like running towards the camera. And that's essentially what you got with the two bottom Cobras. So I love it. I think it's a wonderful cover. The Mobat is a little bit out of proportion to what I think it's supposed to be. We know it's the Mobat because it's G.I. Joe, but it's not 100% on model, I think. And the Cobra guns are definitely like laser guns. Like, they don't really resemble an actual machine gun. So I think they were going for kind of a futuristic laser look on these weapons. But either way, Don Perlin, Mike Esposito, nice work.
Yo, Joe!
Now the story starts, we open with a, kind of like we have in the last few issues, where they do some kind of diagram about the pit. Like, they kind of give you more information about their secret headquarters. I think this really feels like it always stems from a desire to showcase the toys. And this issue, above everything else, is a toy showcase issue. Like, for real. This smacks of some kind of editorial fiat to say we need to feature the Mobat as a toy to sell more Mobats. And the story, of course, starts with a pun. Tanks for the memories. I love a good pun, listeners. And it's interesting. The Mobat on the splash page is pretty accurate to the toy. Like, you look closely at it, it's pretty much got the same look as the toy. Not accurate to the canon, or at least not as accurate to the tank that was on the cover of the comic, even though drawn by the same dudes. Makes me think the cover was, obviously drawn in advance maybe. And we pick up with Breaker, Clutch, and Steeler. They're giving the Mobat a car wash. And Clutch uses a term here that I actually had to look up. It is an awesome term. It's a military term. And they're talking about what they want their tank to look like. And he says they want their tank to look strack. And what does strack mean? It's a very good question. Strack is a U.S. Army slang commonly used during the Vietnam War. It probably originated during World War II and stands for strictly, STR, according, AC, to regulations. So you've got Clutch saying we want the tank to look strictly according to regulations, ultra clean and military, when we roll her down Fifth Avenue in the Armed Forces Day Parade. If you listened to last episode, we talked about Wingfield and the kind of the paramilitary militia group that was hiding out in the woods and kind of shades of stuff that wouldn't go away, and it resonates a little bit today. This one, unfortunately, is a little prescient as well with what we've been told is being desired for Veterans Day this year, a military parade down the streets of D.C. Having a tank roll down the streets of New York seems ill-advised even back then, but it's going to happen. Now, this page and the following is, I don't want to go so far to call it character assassination, but they needed to put someone in the role of questioner. They needed to have someone be the entry-level person. In the movie, it's always the new kid on the team, and so Wolverine gets to show Rogue around, or Jubilee or Kitty Pryde around the mansion and go, hey, this is how it works here, blah blah blah. And the new kid asks all the questions that the readers ask. And unfortunately, in this one, Larry put Scarlet in that role, thus portraying Scarlet as kind of a moron. She does not come off very well in this episode. Now, she doesn't come off too feminine. I'm not saying that, because what does she say on this first page? I think a tank looks best when it's dug in, when you can't see it, when it's camouflage, laying down some heavy fire. So she's like, she's on board with the functionality of this tank. The problem is on the next page.
Yo, Joe!
When we have to have the clutch and all the guys, I hate to use the term mansplain because it's not even a thing back then, but all the guys, clutch, stealer, breaker, they're going through all the specs of the tank. And this is for us. This is 100% for the reader, because all these specs will come into play later on. But as they're kind of instructing Scarlet, her answers are like, oh, engines are boring to me. Big deal breaker. I don't suppose you can plug a Pac-Man cartridge in. The disco is dead, Steeler. She just has all these I'm not really interested in how this stuff works kind of answers. Meanwhile, we know Scarlet's capable. We know she's, better than this. Possibly they might have taken some of this. Well, no, I was going to say they might have applied it to CoverGirl later on, but that's not even true. She was the Wolverine driver. Like, CoverGirl would have totally dug into this stuff. But either way, this page 100% serves as a function for us, the reader. So Scarlet is us in this. It's a shame they had to kind of dumb her down for it, but all the things they're talking about will come into play later. So this is a great use of foreshadowing on this page, and a great description of the toy and the things you could, play styles, things you can do with the toy. Funny thing about this, they talk about it being airtight and you can go underwater. The Mobat was motorized. Mobat had a battery in it. I don't think G.I. Joe wanted you to put your Mobat in water unless they did, so that it wouldn't work anymore and you'd have to buy more Mobats.
Yo, Joe!
So if the previous page was exposition about the Mobat, this page is exposition about the story. So previously, we had to explain exactly what the Mobat is, what it does, all its capabilities, why it's different from another tank. And now we have to explain why it's a big deal that a Mobat, not just a regular old tank, but specifically the G.I. Joe Mobat, is going to be marching in this parade. Apparently, this sets it up like the Mobat, kind of like a Batmobile, per se. Again, digging into G.I. Joe being superheroes, this is saying Mobats aren't just tanks. Mobats are so specialized that we can't let Cobra get their hands on it. And in fact, we treat it like we make it look like any other tank, so that the public would never know that riding next to him is like the superest of super tanks. And so we learned that General Flagg authorized this because he's going to show, after it rolls by in the parade, he's going to show all the other military leaders that, hey, wink, wink, guess what? That was just our top secret tank, and you didn't know anything about it. The purpose of that? Yeah, I don't really know. I feel like you could just show them, take them on base and put it next to a real tank and go, look, it looks exactly the same as a regular tank. I don't know. But we get a neat little bit of James Bond-ish security stuff. So this next sequence that starts in the middle of this page and visually carries us over to the next, and it transports us. It transports us from the story that Steeler's telling Scarlet all the way to the airport and all the way into Cobra's lair. It's kind of like following the feather in Forrest Gump is what it's doing. So we've got this courier that has to take this stuff over to he's taking it to the general. Fortuitous timing that the woman working the X-ray machine happens to also be a Cobra agent, and at that moment decided, I'm done with this film. We can finally send this X-ray film over to Cobra. There's a lot of circumstance and happenstance that's going on here. But she passes it to the bellhop. Bellhop passes it to a cabbie. Cabbie passes it to a doorman, so on and so forth. She would have this woman that was working the X-ray would have no way of knowing, besides the fact that the guy's in a military gear, but that he's carrying something important. He could just be a dude on his way. And maybe that's what her gig is. Honestly, maybe that's her job for Cobra, is to just, when you see someone that looks of import, take the picture and send us that. If it's important, we'll do something with it. So yeah, I just talked myself out of knocking this. Way to go, brilliance.
Yo, Joe!
So we've got the camera, the film. Again, this was in the 80s, so it's actual undeveloped film. Goes to cabbie, to the doorman. Then it goes up to a woman's apartment. I'm assuming it's some high-rise somewhere in New York, right? Her name is Mrs. Hood. I don't know who she is. I don't know if we've ever revisited Mrs. Hood. I would love to. Now would be a great time to say that Matt Anderson, one of our patrons, reached out to me, and I was not incorrect last week. I mean, I'm going to be wrong about a lot of stuff here as we go, ladies and gentlemen. But last week I was not imagining things with Wingfield. They did use Wingfield again. They brought back Wingfield in the Devil's Due series. So I'm excited to dig that back up. And let's see. So we go chronologically. That should be about 6 years. We'll get there. But I knew Wingfield was brought back. And so in this case, we've got Mrs. Hood, who I have absolutely no idea who she is, but she is running a full-on Cobra base out of her apartment. Like, there's monitors. There's there's 5 Cobra technicians, or at least 5 Cobra technicians working there. It is a lot going on here. We also get a female Cobra technician, which is kind of rare. And they develop the film. Of course, we see that the letter to Major General Austin is that, he's rolling the moped out in the Armed Forces Day Parade. Is a CYA letter. He's covering his ass. And, they say, this has got to go to Cobra Commander. Take the usual safe routes to Cobra. Before we move this page, you know what Mrs. Hood might be? Well, one, that means Hollis is in on it. Hollis is the doorman. Mrs. Hood might be a precursor to a Crimson Guard. So think about that, folks. Yo, Joe! And the soldier that takes the information to Cobra Commander, to quote Cobra headquarters, many hours later. It takes him hours to get there. So there's really a fair amount of time that's passing before we get there. We do get a wonderful password that I feel like we need to use this more frequently, where the recognition code to get in is, quote, the mongoose too must die. The mongoose, of course, is an animal that's known for fighting and killing cobras. Rikki Tikki Tavi is probably the biggest example of it. So I love this, that Cobra's getting all literature on us and saying that, yeah, not only do we have to fight the world, but we're also got to kill all the mongoose too. That's great. Now, the soldier was walking through a sewer system. Inside that, dug out into the rock, is the Cobra headquarters. And we see Cobra Commander taking target practice with the Baroness at his side. And he's shooting at full-size replicas of the Joes. We've got full-size replicas of Snake Eyes, Scarlet, and Stalker. Cobra Commander and Baroness both in their blue and yellow. He's got the hood on. He is taking shots from, it doesn't seem very far away, and yet she has a binocular up. And she's saying that he's grouping a little too tightly, and he's a little high and to the left. I want that to come into play later on for some reason. I really do. I want him to take a shot at someone and go a little high and to the left. So, Cobra Commander gets the news that a Mobat is going to be running in the Armed Forces Day Parade. So again, driving home that the Mobat's a really special thing. Yo, Joe! So we've got on this page, it's the Armed Forces Day Parade. So it's the 5th Avenue, New York City, open with an establishing shot, of course. We get we show that there's some crowd work. We see a little bit of the parade. We see this viewing stand with all the generals. And we also, we then go in a little closer and we see that all the generals are just basically, I love the way that they draw them in this with all the hats over their eyes. And even General Flagg's got the glasses to cover his eyes, keeping like the generals, except for when you get to that admiral, that Navy dude on the far right. You can see his full face, but everyone else is kind of like a nameless, faceless, like we're just military bureaucrats. I really like that. I feel like that's a statement, whether or not Hama intended that to be the case, but I love that they did that. I actually have a strange feeling that the admiral on the I think that's what he is, a Navy admiral on the far right, actually might be someone important, because the guy next to him is Mayor Ed Koch, and he was mayor of New York at the time. And as the generals are kibitzing about the marching band and the tanks that are coming up, they want to see these tanks, that he just randomly says, hey, did I ever tell you about the time I almost choked to death on some Chinese food? If it wasn't for the Heimlich maneuver, I wouldn't be here. That is something that happened to him a year earlier. This is in November of 82. In 1981, he was at a Chinese restaurant. He was eating. He almost died, was literally saved by the Heimlich maneuver. And then he went on to champion teaching the Heimlich maneuver to kids, definitely all over New York, and it might have gotten hold all over the nation. So that was a big cause for Ed Koch at the time. So I love that Larry Hama used this in here. It's both informative, kind of like the Now You Know and knowing half the battle PSAs that G.I. Joe did, but it's also kind of poking fun at him because he probably talked about it all the time. So it's like, hey, you're at a party, and hey, did I ever tell you? Yes, you told us. Yes, Eddie, you told us. You almost choked once, and now you're fascinated by the Heimlich maneuver. One of the most important things in this whole actual issue takes place in this middle panel here. So in the middle panel, we've got General Flagg explaining to the generals that we're going to get the tank coming, and that they've got a, quote, Springfield drum and bugle corps. The second general, whoever this Yahoo is, says, Springfield, which one? There must be one Springfield in every state of the Union. Another guy says there must be 2 or 3. That is a crucial distinguishing feature of Cobra that would carry over in the books for years to come. The fact that Springfield is every town. They could be everywhere. And literally, Springfield was the name of the hidden Cobra City. So this is an important part of the mythos. And I want to believe that this was Larry kind of seeding it in, even though this issue in general seems very much like just a one and done toy advertisement. This introduction of, they're related to something called Springfield is hugely important. And then we get a nice big half-page shot that's setting up everything logistically that we need to know about what's about to happen next. We got a marching band in front of the Mobat, and behind it is a great big submarine float that is celebrating the Nautilus, a submarine kind of breaking the ice at the North Pole. My question here, as we'll see soon, is these are Cobra plants. Cobra put together that Nautilus parade float, in like amazingly quick time. They did not know about this parade until relatively recently, and all of a sudden that float was put together because, the Joes were washing the tank. You're not going to wash the tank and then like a week later drive it out. It's got to be within a couple days or a day or so. So that's really funny that Cobra apparently has just a surplus Nautilus parade float tank hanging around. Great line out of here. It's the worst drum and bugle corps I've ever heard. Sounds like they've never played an instrument before today. Yo, Joe! This is a gorgeous shot. It's a half-page close-up, and we see all the 3 guys. And these are the protagonists. We got Clutch, we got Breaker, we got Steeler, and they're all wearing the tank visor helmet that the action figures came with. And they're doing a really good job of making sure that we keep track of who's who. And of course, the second panel on the page, we get a little risque and we see that Steeler is ogling the ladies in the marching parade. Now, what happens next, I'm going to say, is this guy's a Cobra plant. This cop at the very bottom, this traffic cop, been to a million parades, ladies and gentlemen. You've all been to a million parades. They don't let traffic through. They don't do it unless New York does things a little different. But my understanding is the parade route is the parade route. They do not stop the parade to let traffic through. And yet, here we have a cop stopping traffic. I want to point out that the colors on that top image are beautiful. And this is, again, I'm looking at the IDW Complete Collection. So I don't have my original issue in front of me. I don't know if the colors were exactly this scheme, but it's like a beautiful pink sky with a yellow like cloud cover behind it. It just contrasts very nicely with the heavy greens that we're getting in this. So this is one of those instances in a comic book where you don't necessarily color things to be representative of their real world color, because certainly this time of day it would be a blue sky, with white clouds. But that wouldn't give the kind of contrast that they were looking for on this page. And this pink yellow kind of cotton candy look is gorgeous. Like it's a real beautiful look. The yellow, of course, is carried through in the second panel. You get a stripe of yellow that's outlining the tank, and in the bottom, the street level is almost all yellow. So it's solid. It's really nice coloring job on this. I'm pretty pleased with it. Yo, Joe! So now we get the majorettes, the drum, the band. They're unfurling a giant banner. We get a little shot of the crowd reacting to it. The banner is drawn. In order for the banner to do what they want it to do, it needed to be illustrated a little differently. Like what they're going for is that these giant banners masqueraded people's view of the tank, but in reality, when you see it drawn on the page, like they had to be drawn so much bigger. Like it's not covering anything. Like no one would not see this tank get swallowed. What happens in the final page? by the Nautilus float. Like, it's just not a thing that would happen. Ultimately, it's unnecessary, but just saying, it's a little bit of a fail in the translation department from image to concept. I don't know how you would have done it better. I mean, it's still a good looking page, but it's definitely, there's nothing in that would fool anyone, even though you have the crowd going, wow, they're going to make the tank disappear. You know, like, oh, no. You would still see everything that was happening. Yo, Joe! This is great. I think that's Steeler up top who's noticing it, because he screams, he realizes, oh, wow, it could fit. Oh my gosh, it could fit a tank. And he yells Clutch to step on the gas because it is a trap. So it's just a beautiful, really beautiful shot. Now, it's funny. Going back to Cobra's motives, or not motives, but Cobra's plan here. It seems like they secure the Mobad in one piece. The Cobra band seems very surprised that the tank is roaring away. Cobra didn't do anything that would have impeded the forward momentum of the tank. I don't know why they're shocked that it just drove away. Like, it was already driving. I love the idea. I love the sneakiness of it, but it just, like, there's an element missing. Like, they needed, they needed to pull a page from Superman the movie when Valerie Perrine pretended to be in the car accident and they stopped the missile, so the missile couldn't go any further. And while it couldn't go any further, that's when Luthor and Otis, snuck on the back and tried to reprogram the nuke and everything. Like, it needed something like that, because there's nothing stopping Clutch from hitting the gas and taking off, which we see in the bottom. Now, we do get some fun stuff in the bottom where we see that the Cobra's drum band is actually Cobra. Yo, Joe! So now, with the marching band running the streets with machine guns, you can't help but think of Animal House, the end of Animal House, when the marching band gets led into the alleyway. And that's what I'm thinking of here, like this whole tank thing, and frankly, the tank running down the street in a parade, also from Animal House. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on here that pulls from Animal House. This might be Tanks for the Memories alternate title, Animal House 2. It's really great. Of course, the Mobet gets caught up in New York traffic. They're in a giant tank, and a cabbie tells them off. Other drivers also telling them off. This is fantastic. What this does is it gives the people who are on foot a chance to catch up to the tank. You see this a lot in movies where you're like, why can't that person just catch up to him? Notably, they did this in like Die Hard 3 a little bit. If you remember Die Hard with a Vengeance, they were in New York, and they were with Bruce Willis and Sam Jackson, and they're like, all right, we got a car, we got to get someplace real quick. And they turn a corner and boom, stuck in traffic. And it's all about delaying them. It's all about putting an obstacle in their way. So while the Joes escape the immediate thing with Cobra, and by the way, Joes don't have any weapons, so they can't really fight their way back. They also can't get away because they're in the middle of the city, and they can't be running over cars and things like that. We also learn that they're jamming the radio. This is pre-cell phone, so no one's got a phone. We get some shots of Breaker chewing bubblegum and blowing bubblegum, so that's important. And Steeler kind of lamenting the fact that they're kind of wedged in it and they're kind of stuck. Yo, Joe! Until Clutch pulls the Clutch did it first, but the Die Hard with a Vengeance move, and just goes off-road, and he goes onto the sidewalk, and they start, they're warning they're going to run over citizens, but now we are reminded that the tank has this loudspeaker, and this is going to come into play quite a bit in the resolution of the story. So there's a nice, beautiful half-page spread of them on a loudspeaker yelling and telling people to get out of the way. There's a tank coming. You got a guy with a hot dog cart getting run over. Everyone's holding their ears. Like, it's a great shot of the Mobet. I kind of wanted this. I would have kind of wanted this to be one giant splash page instead of half a page. That would have been great. Yo, Joe! Top panel. Turning down Madison Avenue. It's Larry Hama grounding it in reality, kind of giving us, if you're familiar with New York, kind of placing it exactly where they're at. Also reminding them that they really are in the middle of traffic in just a congested city. And Cobra Commander reminding us and the soldiers as well that, how long do you think you can run down around Midtown Manhattan with machine guns and rocket launchers? Hurry up, get it done. We got to get that tank. So this raises the question for me is, what was their plan? They've got rocket launchers. I guess it's to disable the tank. But then if they disable it, how are they going to get it away? Like, now they're away from that iceberg thing. Like what is the plan at this point? They missed capturing it cleanly. So now do they want to destroy it? But then they're not really going to learn anything from it. It's not the only Mobat that the Joes have. I'm a little confused at the actual execution of the Cobra plan here. But as you read it, it doesn't really matter because it's just you're in the middle of a chase. And it's just the Joes are getting chased by Cobras. So it's a roller coaster ride, you know, and you've gone over the hill now. So now you're just riding it out.
Yo, Joe!
And here we learned that the Joes have parked in a construction lot. They're hiding behind a crane, and they don't really know what to do because they don't have any live ammo. Breaker, once again, chewing bubblegum. Let's not forget, every panel has to have Breaker with bubble. Literally every panel. Breaker is talking in these panels, and he has bubblegum. 1, 2, and on the next page, another panel, Breaker with bubblegum. Like, I get it. The guy either likes bubblegum or has a serious, like, pink growth on his face that the G.I. Joe medical coverage cannot remove. I want to say it's that. It's not bubblegum. I want to say he's a giant tumor on his face. They're getting some ideas here, and basically they realize that if the guy's talking to Cobra Commander, then they must be nearby. So they might be able to actually turn the tables and track Cobra Commander. What's important storytelling-wise about this is this empowers these guys. This is now no longer just they're running to escape. Now they go, oh, wait a minute. Our mission to take down Cobra can take place now. So now we can actually turn the tables and try to find Cobra Commander as long as they're up to this. This isn't just, they're not just the helpless victim in a slasher movie getting chased by the killer. They can turn the tables and chase down Cobra.
Yo, Joe!
They also realize that they don't have a lot of time. So it's 2 ticking clocks. Cobra knows they're going to get busted if they keep running around town. And G.I. Joe realizes it, that this is an opportunity they cannot miss. So while they're technically safe, hiding in this construction lot, most likely the Cobras wouldn't double back and find them. They can go out and get Cobra. And we get a little bit of a hint here as Steeler says they're heading to Central Park. Now at the review stand, General Flag is continuing to kind of stall the generals because he doesn't really understand where the tank, because the tank never came in front of the viewing stand, right? The thermal sensors from the tank has alerted Cobra that all those troopers with the machine guns and bazookas, and they are running around with machine guns and bazookas for real. They're giving them a direction where they should find the G.I. Joe tank. G.I. Joe does and always has done a good job of establishing location. And a lot of comics, I was comparing this to some modern comics we were reading, which it's just they're different animals. The language of comics has evolved. But there's so much background work that's done on these pages. In this case, the setting in the box, the viewing box with all the generals, they go to the trouble of putting it, putting in the trees and putting the buildings in the background. And the guys running through the park, they establish that it's Central Park. There's civilians, there's, trees, there's paved walkways. It's not just a close up of band people running. It's more about the picture than it is about the individual humans. I feel like that's not to nitpick and go down an alley, but that's something that modern comics tend to focus on the figure and the body and the human body doing something versus taking a picture of a scene and relaying the storytelling of what's happening to us. It's a subtle, well, it's not really subtle if you hold them up side to side, but it's an important distinction to make. And it's an evolution really of the language of comics.
Yo, Joe!
So here's another great page. We've got 3 dudes rowing in a boat in the middle of, I guess, the Central Park Lake. I'm not sure what the name of that lake is. I'm from Chicago, not New York. But we've got dudes from the City High, looks like a football team. Only nerds would join a stupid marching band. And then they get dunked out of their boat because a tank rolls up. So they were submerged underwater, hiding, waiting for the Cobras to find them. The issues with this are, how did they know Cobra would be able to track them underwater? They didn't, frankly, because if Cobra could trace heat signatures, they should have been able to track them to where they were hiding at that construction yard. And I would have loved to have seen a panel of the guys or something of the guys underwater, like trapped, like they're locked down, and maybe we don't know that they're underwater, but they're like, all right, we're getting ready, we're gonna go, and then you reveal it. Oh, they've been underwater the whole time. But on the flip side, though, it's really funny to see these sports goons get flipped out by the tank. So I guess I'm asking for everything, and you can't always get everything.
Yo, Joe!
Cobra Commander, in one of his great rants up at the top, turn and fight, you cowards. They don't have ammunition. They're just bluffing.
You incompetent steelhead! Your bungling has cost me dearly.
Cobra rants are epic, and this is the start of another one. So they're about to fire their bazookas at the tank when a giant baboom comes crushing over, kind of knocks them over even, and they realize, oh no, the Joes actually do have a weapon. Steeler comes out and he warns them, the next one, we're going to turn you to paste. You guys got to surrender. Now, if you look closely at the animation, though, nothing is coming out of the cannon. There are action lines a little bit like showing the cannon shaking and showing things shaking, but nothing is actually firing out of the turret. And of course, that's going to be important. Yo, Joe! So back to the viewing stand. General Flagg is just embarrassed. This other general, he's talking about incompetent marching bands, ugly majorettes, and boring floats. When am I going to see some tanks? That kind of attitude, I feel like that's what's going on in Washington right now. I just need to see some tanks and I could be happy. It's kind of what we're going to be in for if that ridiculous Veterans Day parade goes forward. So, Flagg's been stalling them, blah, 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 and up rolls the Mobat, and the Mobat is covered in swamp water. It is just gross and nasty and dirty. They call it a disgrace. It's covered in mud. Now, they are marching, the marching band, though. That's really great. The guys have since confiscated their weapons, so they now are armed. And we've got Clutch. He's working he's driving, of course, and he finally figures out where it is. This is a really, 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 really great shot in the bottom of the page. You see Clutch, and I'm pretty sure that this page was inked by Esposito, because the detail on the faces of these guys, there were a couple other pages throughout too that I kind of noticed it as well, but specifically when I was doing my first read through, this one jumped out to me. Clutch's face, that's Mike Esposito doing the inking. That was not John D'Agostino. It was definitely Mike Esposito, because look at that detail. It looks really cool, but it just looked wildly different. But it's a great detail. He is he's both happy and excited. He's just, it's great. And actually, it makes it feel, it really gives it an old war comics feel, which a lot of the G.I. Joe issues don't actually have. There's some subtle detail in it. You see that his radar, it's pinging, and that's the heavy electronic activity, and it's pinging on the crosshair. So it's, even the radar is showing us that, it's right in front of them. It is, whatever they're tracking is right there. Yo, Joe! So again, Flagg has no idea that any of this is going on, so he's stumbling and stuttering to try to explain himself. We don't technically know what's going on either, but Clutch does, and the guys don't. Steeler and Breaker certainly don't. I think it's Steeler that says, I don't know what you're up to, but I'll put in a good word for you at the court-martial, which is really quite funny. Clutch always had a few chairs missing at home. I think that's coming from Breaker. And you've got a really wonderful close-up shot that says a lot. You see all the generals that don't know any better. They're jumping off the platform, which frankly they should. Even General Flagg should be jumping off the platform. You have a tank rolling to knock down your platform. But Flagg straight draws his 45. He's going to stop his own dudes. If they're really out of control, he has to stand the line and take care of it. It's really great. Yo, Joe! And now we see that Cobra Commander the whole time has been hiding underneath the stands of the viewing stand. Now, General Flagg's yelling at Clutch to hit the brakes, and this is a comic trope where word balloons can traverse spaces that normal conversations never would. So you've got Clutch saying, I can't hear you, got a tank in my ear. Clutch would have no idea that Flagg is yelling. You see this a lot. You see this a lot in G.I. Joe. You see a lot of people talking through through cockpits and stuff, and in superhero comics too. It's funny, you see it a ton in the movies, in the Fast and Furious movies. They're driving in completely separate cars, and they're just talking to each other. Now, they excuse it by saying that they have these in-ear audio walkie-talkies, and that's the, quote, magic tech that makes it all possible. But what they're doing there is what comics have been doing for years and years and years, and is carrying on conversations amongst locations that you never would be able to have these conversations at. So that's next time you watch Fast and the Furious movie, think about that. They're stealing directly from comic book language. General Flagg drew his gun, but didn't really shoot. So I'm going to question your commitment to using that 45, Flagg. But he's very upset about what's happening. Yo, Joe! And we get the tank busting up Cobra headquarters. Its top panel is not the most well-rendered example of what just happened. It's too close, in my opinion. It's a real big close-up of the tank busting up some generic machinery, and all the Cobras, they're all in silhouette. It looks like Baroness and probably Cobra Commander in the middle, maybe, and a Cobra Soldier, but you can't really tell that. And the machinery itself isn't really that distinguishable. So we know what happened just because we're reading it and we're paying attention. But it's, as an image, it's not really indicative that he just busted in on their hideout. Like, I feel like the focus of this image should not have been the tank. It actually should have been Cobra Commander, with the tank kind of coming in on them. But it's just this casual observer. We see in the next panel that the tank is now completely covered by the fallen grandstand. And he says that he's trapped. It's a tank. I feel the tank could just keep on rumbling, but that's all right. It just takes Clutch out of the conversations. There are green shirts running away. I believe that's a miscoloring. That's supposed to be blue shirts. It's supposed to be the Cobra Soldiers running. We see that Clutch mentions the top snake. Again, this is another one of those conversation things that happens in comics when he wouldn't be able to hear him. But General Flag realizes that Cobra Commander is actually there. And of course, because comics are drama and stakes and awesomeness, out of nowhere comes a Girl Scout troop. Which Cobra Commander uses to hide behind. It's so great.
Yo, Joe!
Top panel, we got a showdown. There's a Girl Scout troop, which is stopping Flag from taking a shot, even though he's an expert marksman. And Cobra Commander, he takes his shot. Now, let's look back. Earlier in the comic, when we saw Cobra Commander at taking target practice, Baroness said, "A little high and to the left, Cobra Commander." In this case, we have the shot going high and to the right. I wonder, one, if they gave any thought to it at all, if they artistically tried to, like, if this was a plot moment where Hama set it up that he shoots high and off. And so in this case, he obviously would be aiming to hit, he'd be aiming like center mass on Flag, and instead he ends up hitting him in the head and to the side. But if they did, they drew it incorrectly because he hits him high and to the right. He should have been hitting him on what would be Flag's right-hand side of his head. He instead he hits Flag's left-hand side of the head. So either there was no intent to foreshadow from that earlier picture, but I have a feeling Larry Hama's too good of a writer to not realize that's foreshadowing. And then I think there was just a mistranslation in the artwork that Flag should have been hit on the other side of his head. But that allowed Cobra and the Baroness to get away. The Girl Scouts are safe. Clutch is happy that Flag's alive. He just grazed his temple. Again, this is, as a kid, this made me think like, oh, you can get shot in the head. It'll just bounce off your head. You'll be fine. Yeah, okay.
Yo, Joe!
So now back at the pit, we see Scarlet returns to kind of cap this off, and she's serving as medical practitioner. They haven't yet introduced Doc, of course, but she doesn't have any dialogue. It's another thing of like Scarlet in this story is kind of treated like Wonder Woman was in a lot of the early Justice League stories, or definitely in the Justice Society stories, where Wonder Woman was like she was literally like the secretary, she would keep the notes for the meetings and things like that. You're getting a little bit of that with Scarlet, not saying Hama did it on purpose. The fact that he even included her in the story is great, because without her, it is just a story of three dudes and a tank, where you have General Flag be like, I don't understand. Like, you fired your cannon earlier. We saw them fire a cannon. How was it? And we get the reveal that, they just used Breaker's bubble gum, which we saw copious amounts of times throughout the issue. And they used that giant loudspeaker, which we saw foreshadowed like 500 times in the issue, to make a pop sound, a blam. And that duly impresses General Flag. And that is the end of G.I. Joe issue number 5. So good. So great. I really enjoyed it. I really thought it was excellent. So as a whole, this comic is starting to come together. They're really starting to build the world. Now we've been introduced to Springfield, and it's only going to get better. It's only going to ramp up to become like the deep layered drama that we all know and love about G.I. Joe. So I'm really excited. I hope you guys all enjoyed hearing it. And remember, go to patreon.com/JoeandJoePod and see how you can hear this. We're doing at least one a week, if not maybe more. So thanks for listening. And now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.